Recording. And so we're on August the 9th. Boy, this year is going fast, even though we're all sitting at home. I'd like to start by, let's just do this, sorry. I'd like to start with our Edmonton West land acknowledgement. So we live, work, and meet on Treaty 6 lands. We acknowledge and respect that this is an enduring agreement between First Nations and the Crown that applies to Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge and respect the cultures, languages, and histories of the First Nations, the First Peoples on and original stewards of the land. We recognize that the Métis have a deep historical connection to this land, and people come from all over Canada and the world to make this land their home. We welcome their stories of connection to this land as well. As Rotarians, we seek to advance understanding, goodwill, and friendship and peace through the ideal of service. We are all treaty peoples sharing the land and respecting each other and learning how to be part of reconciliation. I'd also like to recognize that today for the United Nations is International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. So welcome. This is August the 9th, 2021. So welcome very much to the meeting. I don't believe we have any guests today, so I'll just continue on. I also like to mention the Olympic Games ended yesterday. I must admit, I watched bits and pieces of it and it was a real joy, not worrying about Trump in the United States, not worrying about COVID. It was just a nice break from it all. I watched the women's soccer and a few other events. And it was quite mesmerizing. It was just such a relief to have something different on our news. And it was really quite positive. But now it's over. So we're back to all those other things. The theme for this year is Serve to Change Lives. Also like to remind you of who the club executive is. I'm the past president. And then Jason, of course, is the current president. And just recognizing that we do have a few positions on the board that are currently vacant and are service opportunities for anybody interested in taking them on. So that's new generations and youth, community services, and club administration. As Jason has indicated, his theme for the year, connection, service, fellowship, and fun. COVID and all of its various aspects are going to end next Monday. And so as we've been talking about getting back together in September, I think we'll start moving towards getting back together in the fellowship and fun and connection and service. As we get to our speakers, our usual ground rules, raise your hand at the end of the presentation in gallery view, use the chat function if you wish to use that, and let's mute our mics when we're not speaking. So Rob.
Thanks, Acting President David. We have an interesting agenda today that's comprised of our own members, and I want to introduce the speaker lineup. I think Joe Lizotte is going to be joining, but we put him on at the end because we, as often happens, Joe gets caught up in an appointment that goes over the 12 o'clock and he comes on a bit late. But our topic today is, generally speaking, what it's been like to do business in the COVID era. As we see the end of the pandemic coming, we hope. I have to say, I considered myself very fortunate that I retired from the legal profession after 37 years in 2019. So and the last 10 years of my legal practice, I was involved intimately with the management of my law firm. I was hugely relieved that I didn't have to manage my business through this pandemic. A number of our members are still actually gainfully employed, and I thought it would be interesting to hear from a few of them, particularly a few that have been quite busy, and in fact seem to have been very busy through the pandemic, so to the point that we haven't even been able to see that much of them on these calls. In particular, I want to thank Spencer for stepping up today, because he's in fact participating in the Downtown Club's golf fundraiser, and you'll see Spencer's actually sitting in his car, I think, in the parking lot at the Highlands Golf Course, and has agreed to join us and kick off the discussion. So after Spencer, we're going to hear from Daryl Ripley, and hopefully Joe Lizotte will be coming on the call, and we'll have something to contribute as well. Talk a little bit about how he's managed his dental practice through all of this, all the challenges of the pandemic. So thank you, all of the three of you, for agreeing to speak. And you all know Spencer. He's a man who needs no introduction, an illustrious past president of our club, as indeed are all our speakers today. Spencer, please take it away.
Well, thanks very much, Rob. I'm apologetic for the number of meetings that I've unfortunately have missed via Zoom. As Rob had mentioned, I personally, and Annie as well, we've never been busier in our careers since March of 2020. You know, we've been very, very fortunate, and we we remember those that unfortunately have been lost through this pandemic. You know, we've been very fortunate in business. As I'd mentioned, we have not been busier. You know, we're very well funded. And my team really came together in March of 20, and we worked with our entire portfolio literally on a case-by-case, a tenant-by-tenant basis. And we've been one of the very, very fortunate developers that we did not lose one business throughout the entire pandemic. You know, we worked with them one-on-one. We made sure that they all took advantage of the various programs that were being offered by both the federal and provincial governments. And, you know, so far, so good. As Rob had mentioned, hopefully we're coming through to the end of this, where you know, COVID is going to be, you know, no different than the flu. And we're all going to have to get our booster shots on an annual basis. But, you know, through all this, you know, this too shall pass. And sometimes these situations provide opportunities. And, you know, we currently have projects going on in downtown Phoenix. We're building a 38-story high-end multifamily building. We're completing the two tallest towers between Calgary and Vancouver and Kelowna. We have a 900-acre development right on Okanagan Lake in Kelowna. We are building our first multifamily project in Edmonton, kitty corner to the Mazankowski Heart Institute, which will be a 13-story mixed-use building. And we're just recently building a new multifamily project in Canmore. So we have never, as a company, been busier in Western Canada and Western US. We are going full gangbusters, and you know, as they say, this too shall pass, and hopefully we start coming out of this and returning to some sense of normalcy. But I personally, you know, really have felt that one of the greatest impacts of the pandemic has been the opportunity to remain actively involved with Rotary, and certainly, you know, fellowship and doing social and charitable things with our group have been very, very limited. But I do truly believe that as the September long weekend approaches, after that, we are going to be returning to hopefully face-to-face meetings, which I'm really looking forward to. And Annie is very much looking forward to resuming organizing, you know, various fellowship and charitable events for everybody. And cannot say enough how much we're looking forward to reconnecting with everybody on a more personal face-to-face level. So, you know, we've been very, very fortunate as a family. We've not encountered any extraordinary challenges because of the pandemic. We've remained happy and healthy and busy. And we really look forward to, as everyone else does, getting back to some type of schedule. We really were only closed in our office for a couple of months in April and May, and we have been going full out in our office ever since, and including our big Edmonton City Center redevelopment. The Bay is finally gone. We've negotiated with them an exit, and we're going to be commencing our first phase of our redevelopment of Edmonton City Center, which ultimately be a 3, 5, 7, 10-year project at well north of $100 million. And so we're into the first phase now, and we're very excited to see what that brings us. So we hope to get away for a week to BC on the island in September, and look forward to seeing everybody upon our return.
Thank you for the update, Spencer. I'm just thinking while we have Spencer here, if anybody has any comments or questions for him. Go ahead, Rob.
I have a question, Spencer. Has the development of the LRT downtown also impacted Edmonton City Center a bit? And is that in the long term presumably going to be a bit of a positive, or how does that factor in?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to actually impact not just Edmonton City Center, but it's going to have a dramatic positive impact on our new project at the U of A Hospital, simply because they are very much transit-oriented developments. It's funny that you ask, Rob. It has drastically impacted Edmonton City Center. En route to the Highlands, I came from the White Mud on 75th Street and had an opportunity to really firsthand see the impact and the infrastructure of the LRT. And I think everybody has their own opinions on the extent to which Edmonton has really gone, and whether Edmonton truly was a big enough metropolitan area to justify all of this LRT construction. But no, long term, it will absolutely have a positive fact, certainly on the Edmonton City Center downtown.
Hey, Daryl.
Hi, Spence. Thanks for sharing kind of how your profession was impacted kind of through the pandemic. Just on that note, on City Center, like I'm downtown, obviously, so I'm always interested in the development going on downtown. So the Bay is exited, and is that, so your plans for the redevelopment, does that include the Bay building then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the entire Edmonton City Center asset, both west and east, literally have to be turned inside out. As the development kind of matured over the last number of years, unfortunately, it really became a concrete bunker. And, we, our partners, we plan on converting the asset into truly a global mixed use gathering place. We're going to be building at least one, if not two more multifamily towers as part of the redevelopment. The west, our intent is to literally turn that building inside out, make it far more open and welcoming with glazing and some anchor tenancies, reduce the amount of retail. Retail will be focused predominantly in Edmonton City Center East. Bring in some experiential, components to the development, and obviously become more a part of the ice district and the arena downtown. Really right now, the biggest challenge that we've had since March of last year is occupancy in the downtown core has been between 11 and 14%. So there really hasn't been the traffic, which has dramatically impacted the retail at Edmonton City Center. We've lost about 40 tenants. Office, thank goodness, has remained strong, although not very strongly occupied. And like I said, we hired two global architectural firms that have been putting together the design of our 3-4 different phases. And Edmonton City Center West definitely will be going through a significant transformation.
Thank you.
Ingrid?
Well, first of all, Spencer, with all the gloom and doom that we've had the last year and a half, it's so nice to hear a positive message that there is good things happening at Edmonton and that all is well with you. So thank you for that. I'm curious, do you know what's happening with the Manulife Center and where the space that Holt Renfrew occupied?
Yeah, I mean, that will all kind of formulate part of the, redevelopment of downtown. I always categorized Edmonton City Center as the hole in the donut of downtown Edmonton. We really bought it for the quality of the real estate, not so much of what is there today. Manulife is going to be going through its own redevelopment, although not to the same extent as Edmonton City Center. Holt Renfrew will ultimately be backfilled. Really right now, I think, aside from traffic downtown, the biggest challenge that we have is, city council, and we've obviously got a looming election coming in October. But with the lack of traffic downtown, unfortunately, there's been a lot of press with regards to the negatives of the opioid crisis and the homeless. And this really is an issue that the new council is going to have to meet head on to ensure that people feel safe coming downtown. And as Edmonton downtown starts to transform and the pandemic starts to be in our rearview mirror, I think we're going to start obviously seeing more activity again at the arena. And as these major assets start getting redeveloped, it really is our hope that we'll see a significant transformation downtown.
Thank you. Thanks, Spencer.
Do you have any other questions for Spencer? Well, thank you, Spencer. I agree with Ingrid. It's great to hear this positive news of more investments coming in the future. Sad to hear of tenants closing their doors. I think we're going to see some more of that in the city. I've certainly noticed a couple of restaurants, but certainly nice to see that we seem to be coming out of this.
Indeed.
Next up, we have Daryl Ripley.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, David. I found it exceptionally busy over the last year and a half as well. That is one of the reasons why I haven't been on the Zoom meetings as frequently as I'd like to. I always have it scheduled in my calendar, but usually on a Monday, something comes up as I start my week that I have to kind of shift some things around. My wife, Peggy, works in the same industry. So when COVID hit, now she's with CIBC Wood Gundy, my competitor moved in next door to me in our condominium. So we were both working from home at that point. So that would have been March of 2020. And fortunately for me in particular, RBC has the technology that accommodated being able to work from home, meeting with clients, and using what we use with our firm, WebEx, quite effectively. And initially, there was a bit of a learning curve with clients, of course, because they weren't accustomed to using that type of technology, many of our clients. Our average clients in the firm is around 62 years of age. And the average client in my practice is about 56 years of age. So I found it a little bit easier for people to adapt because many of them were used to using technology in their day-to-day life, but it was a little bit of a learning curve initially. But in terms of capacity, it actually increased my capacity to meet with more people virtually, just because typically my clients are spread over Western Canada, and I do a lot of traveling to service my client relationships. So the travel component was taken out of my day, and it now kind of involves meeting by WebEx, which again had a substantial improvement with my capacity anyway. Peggy, the same thing. Her role is a little bit different than my role, kind of in what I do. She supports somebody that does what I do. So I got a good sort of view from a support point of view, kind of how things are managed through the pandemic. And their technology kind of adapted fairly quickly as well. And they were able to kind of service their clients. In terms of kind of effectiveness, there are certain metrics in our industry that we kind of follow. One is kind of assets under management, revenue, and fee-based revenue, and as well kind of net new assets coming in. And all of those metrics, on all of those measurements, my practice kind of exceeded any kind of year and a half that I've ever had while I've been in the industry. And here's kind of what happened. So when we're dealing with clients that typically have fairly substantial discretionary income. So through the pandemic, they weren't spending that discretionary income in the places they were accustomed to. So with no travel expenditures went down. The markets also performed exceptionally well after kind of the 33% drop that happened in March of 2020. It's more than bounced back. And so we saw a lot of net new asset growth of just people having more discretionary income to invest. Secondly, the markets performed well, so it encouraged people to invest as well. So we see that trend kind of continuing through at least the forecastable future over the next year or two. So as far as kind of business objectives, we expect that positive trend to continue and to unfold. I am back in the office. My team's back in the office. We do have sort of a flex work schedule. I work usually do my morning routines from home, where I'm kind of setting up kind of the investment strategies that we're allocating for the day, and then send that to my team, and kind of they do the trading throughout the day. And they're running a flex schedule as well. They're all in the office today, all of us, for the first time in quite a long time. There's certainly still social distancing measurements and precautions in our work environment. For example, when I leave my office with the doors closed right now, I'll put on a mask while I'm kind of walking about. We're starting to see more and more people come into the office as well. I mean, when I came in, when I was allowed to through the peak of the pandemic, I might be the only person on our entire floor, when normally there's about 45 to 50 employees kind of on our floor. So we're starting to see people come back into the office, although RBC is kind of approaching it from a work-life balance perspective, because employees got accustomed to being able to manage their lives quite effectively by working from home. You know, for example, throwing the laundry in during your breaks, all that sort of stuff, making your lunch during your break. And I think it really, helped people deal with the emotional impact of the pandemic by giving them just a little bit more flexibility to manage their home life with their working life. What I see probably happening for me moving forward as we come out of the pandemic, I think clients will have a choice. So they don't want to drive downtown and meet me in my downtown office. We can conduct a WebEx meeting. So that's going to give them sort of more access to our service delivery model. I expect I'll still travel from time to time, because I do have clients that prefer to meet face to face. So that'll continue to happen, although probably not as frequently, with the option to again meet via kind of virtual meetings. In terms of our team, we're expanding our team. I've got a new associate that'll be starting with us in 2 weeks, so we can sort of manage the capacity for our service model as well. And we're seeing more specialization. One of my associates specializes more in the wealth planning area, working with our estate planning specialists, our financial planning specialists, and tax planning specialists in our financial advisory support group, and coordinating those times and gathering the information. One of my associates specializes in more of the portfolio management, helping me kind of run the discretionary portfolios that we do on clients' behalf in order to meet their objectives. And then the third associate that I'll be hiring starting in 2 weeks, she'll be working more in the client service area, helping me schedule meetings, setting up the meeting plans with clients, and just making sure that we deliver on our service model. So I expect, what this has done for me personally, it's given me the ability to work extremely flexible. So I would see, me staying in the industry longer than I probably would normally have, just because it affords a flexibility where I can be in Australia and work with my clients virtually. I've got a solid support team, and providing I keep my physical health and my mental health, I can see kind of the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, stretching out kind of my retirement objectives.
Thank you very much, Daryl, for that overview. Do we have any questions for Daryl or any comments? Go ahead, Dick. You're muted, Mick. Dick. There you go.
Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, always enjoy your talks. Has the pandemic health-wise affected a lot of your customers?
Well, Vic, when I go through, we've had some in our family. 2 of our kids got COVID, and then one of our daughter's boyfriend got COVID. They got through it fairly quickly. They're all healthy, so there was really no kind of lasting impact that we've seen with them. They're into sports, they're fairly athletic, so there hasn't been any carryover effects. In terms of my clients, I can't think of any client actually that has gotten COVID, with the exception of one of my clients I was speaking to on Friday. I didn't know that she had COVID. She got through it fairly quickly. She's somebody that lives in Calgary, and she's a contract technical employee with one of the oil and gas firms, and she said it was like kind of getting the flu. She's in her early 60s, and she feels no impact now in terms of carryover effects. And she's actually she was the only one in her family that had COVID, and she's not sure even how she received it, because she was fairly careful through the pandemic. So considering that I've got 140 households with extended families, that's sounds like most of my clients kind of really followed the health measurements closely.
Thank you.
Joe, did you have a question?
I do. Daryl, obviously the government's been spending, wisely, I would say, to try and make sure that our economy is kept afloat. But at some point in time, these debts will have to start to be paid off. Do you expect that when do you think that that's going to start to happen? And how do you expect that's going to influence markets in that over the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's a good question, Joe. There's a lot of concern in the market just on deficits and inflationary pressure and the impact that it's going to have on the financial market moving forward. Here's the position that our economists are taking. In terms of debt to GDP, Canada and the US are still in kind of a very manageable situation, especially when you consider that interest rates are extremely low right now. And how governments produce debt and service debt is they issue government bonds, and government bonds are issued at a certain interest rate. And that interest rate is the debt servicing cost to governments in order to kind of service their deficit. And we expect the interest rate environment to stay fairly low. We are seeing some inflationary pressure right now, but it's largely bottleneck pressure based on supply chains being affected, ramped up demand that is kind of happening. But in terms of our outlook with the inflationary pressure, we see that'll subside over kind of the next 6 to 12 months as we kind of continue to come out of the pandemic. And the other thing too is that there's less kind of risk of shutdown. I think most governments are leaning towards the opinion that there's some larger risk to shutting down the economy than there is to allow it to gradually open and let the vaccination penetration kind of deal with the COVID trends.
Any other questions or comments for Daryl? Okay, so next up, Joe.
Sure, I will unmute myself. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. This has been actually a very, I've enjoyed the previous speakers tremendously. It's very interesting to see what their experiences been. Ours was one of ups and downs in major swings. At the beginning of the pandemic, on the Friday the 13th of March, we were shut down basically completely. And all dental offices had to at first, for about a few days, they said, oh, you could just handle emergencies, take care of or cement crowns and things like that, work that needed to be sort of urgently done. And then there was just a complete shutdown. So we were then shut down for 2 months until the middle of May. And so those 2 months were a bit challenging from the standpoint that, we went from being, busy offices to, all of a sudden having nothing to do. They talk about people coming out of the pandemic either bloated, blasted, or bust. My goal was to do the last one. So I was on my bike training every day and working out with weights and things like that to try and just keep myself sort of mentally and physically in good shape. But also at the same time, just you knew that at some point in time we were going to reopen, and so we were really focusing on what government requirements were going to be on us, what safety requirements we were going to have, and what we needed to do to keep both our patients safe and our staff safe. And so as regulations started to come forward, one of the first ones being is the need for masks and the N95 style mask, which we don't normally use within within the dental office, and so we had to try and source those. Of course, there was a massive spike in demand, and so when we were purchasing ours, we were paying about 10 times what the normal prices for them were. There was a lot of a lot of profiteering that went in on the PPE front there. But we were able to source those, and then also there was going to be the requirement to, not just wear scrubs within the office or types of, we would have to wear surgical gowns for all the treatments that we were doing. And certainly there was, in terms of keeping, our patients safe and our staff safe, we needed airflow and maintaining. We knew that the virus was transmitted primarily by aerosols, and so that we had to, essentially have the air be clean, between each patient. That meant working with the building, make sure that the airflow within the building, the circulation within the building was increased, and then also we purchased air filtration units that contained an ultraviolet light inside it that would kill viruses as it cycled through. So we were able to get to the point where you could have the room with a 10-minute turnover, with complete certainty that the room was going to be virus free. In terms of staff, we also had to there was a new requirement. You could either do an N95 mask and a surgical mask and protective glasses, or you could use a surgical mask and a visor over top of that. So that meant sourcing out visors, because that seems to be the preferred method for most of the staff. I use the 2-mask method. For those of you that, a lot of people will, you would see things in the media all the time of people saying that, wearing a mask was going to kill them, and that it was. So if you can imagine an N95 plus a surgical over top of that, we kind of got used to that. So when you did reopen, there was a lot of challenges from the standpoint of childcare. Most of the staff in dental offices tend to be women, and a lot of them, are responsible for childcare arrangements, but daycares, schools were all closed. So it was, it wasn't until September that we kind of got our full staff back up and running again. We also had to make some modifications to our scheduling so that we could keep staff safe within the office. One of the biggest concerns was lunch. There had been, and there still to this time has been, no documented cases of transmission of COVID from a patient to a hygienist or a staff or an assistant or a dentist or vice versa. But there has been numerous cases of staff-to-staff transmission, and most of those have happened in lunchrooms. They tend to be, in most offices, very cramped, and everyone takes their lunch at the same time. So we redid our schedule so that we spread out our lunches. So all 3 of the doctors take lunches at different times, and then we tried to make the staff take lunches at different times, and then we spread out within the office too into some administrative areas, set them up as, put TV tables out and things like that so people could have lunches safely. So safety was really a big concern for us. Other things that we implemented was screening of all of our patients. If you've gone to a dentist or even a doctor, you'll answer a series of questions to make sure that you're not symptomatic for COVID or haven't come into contact with anybody. And we've been very fortunate. We did have two staff members who contracted COVID outside the office, but they did not. They were caught through that screening process, and they did not transmit it to any other staff within the office. And one of them had a really rough go of it. She contracted the long form of COVID, so she was off work for 6 weeks, and she's back to work now. But it took her a couple of months to kind of get fully up to speed, and I'd say she's probably at about 90% speed right now. She's still suffering some of the fatigue effects of COVID. The other thing with planning was a real challenge there for us. We normally plan to take some vacations each year, but having 2 months off with zero income, and always the worry of there being another wave, and then perhaps going on vacation because we all go together, and then suddenly there being another shutdown. We chose to just have staff take vacation sort of on a rotating basis, and I just kept working. So, I felt that once everyone was vaccinated within the office and that we had a good level of vaccination within the community, the likelihood of a full shutdown was going to be essentially nominal. So this July, I was finally able to take 2 weeks off. So that was definitely a real pleasure, a real treat. The other, it was interesting listening to Spencer talk about how downtown business has been so drastically affected. We were affected by the shutdown, and then we were affected mostly by staff childcare issues, which affected our ability to schedule patients. But we were fairly busy, and I would say within the last 6 to 8 months, once all of the seniors had been vaccinated, they really started to come to the office as a big wave. And many of them haven't been in for 2 years or more, depending on how long it had been before they were due. So a lot of people need a lot of work right now. Unfortunately for a lot of people, something that might have been just a small filling if we'd seen them in June of 2020, it's now a root canal and a crown, or it's an extraction and an implant. And so a lot of people need, or it would have been 1 or 2 small things of work, but now it's like 6 or 7 large areas of work. So we've been just really swamped, particularly the last 6 months, especially with seniors in the last while. So moving forward, it's a very interesting time. I mean, certainly, Dr. Hinshaw is taking a bit of a gamble, sort of a calculated risk that to treat COVID now essentially like another form of the flu that we're going to be having to deal with on an ongoing basis, not thinking that there's likely to be another wave that could create issues with hospitals and that. And we'll have to see how that pans out. I wish we weren't the province that was sort of running on the leading edge of that experiment, but we'll see how that plays out. Certainly, we're on the front lines. And we've been fortunate. We've been safe through it. We've learned that the PPE works. We've learned that vaccines are effective. We're we've even though I saw an article in the New York Times that ranked professions for their various risk assessment with COVID because of the exposure to aerosols. Dental hygienists were ranked #1 by quite a long shot, and then dentists not actually all that far behind them. So we're essentially #1 and #2 in terms of risk of contracting COVID. And luckily for us, and my understanding is for Alberta, that no dentists or staff have caught COVID within an office. So that's a good thing. So that's basically where it happens right now. Does anybody have any questions?
Joe, I'll ask a question. So
yeah, for sure.
So on August 16th, there's basically an opening up of the economy, and a lot of the restrictions are taken away. We're not doing COVID testing anymore, etc.
Yeah.
Does that change how you're going to operate your clinic? And then I have a part 2 as well, and that is, so we've had people who taken vaccines, and people who are not taking the vaccines. So people without vaccines, people with, does that change your practice at all either?
No, that's it. So those are 2 great questions. So the mandates that we have from the Alberta Dental Association and College right now are that it's status quo in terms of the way that we run things within the office. So we're essentially running things the same way we were when we were in the depth of the of the worst waves of the pandemic in terms of PPE. And I think a number of those things, maybe not all of them, but a number of those things I think are going to carry through forever.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see, like we had a decision to make about the surgical gowns. There's 2 ways of doing it. One is to have a disposable gowns, or the other option is to have laundered gowns. And so we signed a 3-year contract with the Canadian Learning Supply to provide us with gowns for 3 years. So our plan is that we're going to carry on with that. We basically want to have sort of all exposed surfaces that we have on our bodies not be exposed to aerosols at all. So I think those a lot of those are going to carry on. Can you remind me what the second part of the question was?
No, that's fine.
Sure, I get that.
Basically, we've got in the province, we have basically 2/3 the people are going to be they're vaccinated, and 1/3 that are not.
Non-vaccinated. Yes. So that is a good question. So I think that we are going to start to ask people if they're vaccinated. That hasn't come up yet, but I believe we're going to be asking people if they're vaccinated, and then we're going to sort of, while the levels of PPE and that may start to drop for the general public, like for people who are vaccinated, we'll treat vaccinated, unvaccinated people as at the same high risk that we're treating everybody at this point in time. I think that that's likely the pathway that it's going to go. I mean, we would, you know, I can only speak for myself personally, but I would love to see, you know, some type of vaccine mandates come into place. You know, particularly, I mean, we're lucky in our office, people were very compliant with getting the vaccine. I mean, I was sort of, you know, basically checking every day to see when we would be good to go for it. I was, you know, super keen to get a vaccine. I would like to see it mandated for, I would love to see it mandated for all healthcare workers. I'd love to see it mandated for any workers who work in any type of seniors homes, especially since my mother lives in one, you know, and especially since those populations were so hard hit. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would disagree with me on that, but I think there's certain people, you know, I consider it a privilege to be in the profession that I'm in. It's not a right that I have to be in the profession that I'm in, and I see as part of that privilege is being responsible to make sure that I keep my patients safe. And so that's why I've taken that step. But I don't know that some people have other values that sort of override that, and they choose not to have the vaccine for those reasons. But there are certain populations that I think it would be critical for them to be vaccinated. Does that kind of answer your question, or is that too much of a of a rant?
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, and it's sort of general question. It came from a webinar I heard last week, and somebody asked the interesting question: was COVID the test, or is the recovery from COVID the test? So, Joe, I hear you talking about what kind of changes might come out of what we've learned from COVID. Daryl, you were talking about how that might change some of your operations within RBC and might change your outlook. What have we learned from COVID, and how might that influence us as we go forward?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And like when I think of COVID itself, I think of where have we been the most successful, and where has there been sort of massive failures? And I think where we've been most successful is on sort of the pure scientific portion of it, the development of a vaccine. I mean, that happened at an astounding rate. You know, there was global cooperation in a way that never happened at any time in the past. I think where the failures happened was on the side of sort of public policy. I mean, it was very interesting to see. It seems like nations that are sort of more centered towards the individual seems to fare the worst, and nations that seem to center a bit towards more the collective seems to fare better. You know, there is definitely a difference between Canadians and Americans. You know, even though we're so close to one another in so many ways, I think we tend to be a little bit more towards the collective. We tend to look after our neighbors a little bit more, whereas they tend to be really focused on their individual life, and the individuality is such an important thing for them. So I think that's something where, you know, all levels of government are going to have to look at and say, you know, how do we sort of tiptoe around or still respect individual rights, but how do we move more quickly and more firmly in ways that can mobilize, you know, all of the resources of the country, you know, when it happens again. Because I truly believe it is going to happen again. I think this was a test run, and it was, you know, there's viruses that are, you know, potentially much worse. I mean, the original SARS, we were just so lucky that it petered out years ago. We didn't really learn a lot of lessons from that one, but I think you're right, Glenn. I think we will learn some lessons from this. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Where do you think some of the lessons are that we can learn from this?
Well, I mean, you've shared some of them, that tension between the individual and collective, and how we manage through that. But I'm also thinking about, you know, and Daryl, you talked about this, the ability to rely more on electronic linkages and some of the opportunities that's created, some of the flexibility that's created, and yet also reminding us very firmly of our need for connection. You know, even some of us who are great introverts discovered that we needed to stay connected, needed to find those. So I'm just, you know, some of those observations came out, but I think it's often in large organizations. How are large organizations going to respond to this? Are we going to come back together, or are we going to move into more of a hybrid model, as maybe Daryl, you were suggesting?
Yeah, I would just, John, on that, there's a couple sort of, I think, economics / business learnings that have come through this. I think businesses that have been able, that we're in the hospitality industry, restaurant business, for example, I think they learned through the pandemic. There's another delivery channel in order to get that maybe they underestimated. For example, home delivery, you know, skip the dishes is down now. I don't know if anybody's cooking. There's so many dishes packages being delivered that it's unbelievable. As a matter of fact, they're looking at developing, and Spencer's not on the call right now, but they're looking at developing real estate without a stove and hours. This with a microwave to skip the dishes. I mean, so there's been some really, I think, good innovation and making consumer behavior changes. And I would also say too that what we're learning now is that we can still be productive, or what we learned through the pandemic, we can still be productive without having to come and gather together in an office. But what we also learned is that as human beings, we collaborate more in person. So much communication verbally and in person, body language, that I think we learned that while we can still manage through this, we don't have the same interpersonal impact that we do when we meet face to face.
That's true. It's interesting, you know, in terms of like the medicine dentistry side. I mean, dentistry doesn't really lend itself very much to a Zoom meeting type of. But I've had all of my meetings with my physicians. I've talked to my physician, you know, had some prescriptions renewed and a few things like that. And for the longest time, he wasn't seeing any patients at all physically. He was only seeing patients virtually. And I think that that's going to open up, you know, a lot of opportunities, you know, for collaboration with patient care. You know, so much imaging now is digital. You know, so much treatment planning can be done digitally. You can, you know, like I've been able to put some difficult cases up on sort of like dental message boards and say, here, you know, what are your guys' thoughts on how you would handle this case? And so there's opportunities certainly for collaboration there. That some jobs are just very physical and hands-on, and you just have to have a person there, though. Yeah. Good. Well, my team is I've got you guys in one ear and my team in the other ear, and they tell me I have to get back to work. So I'm gonna have to bow out. I've really enjoyed this. This has been a great session. It's very interesting. So I wish to thank everybody who's been involved with it, and thanks to everybody who is listening, who's watching. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Have a great day. Just wondering before we move on, if there's any other comments from those that are attending today's call as to their observations living within COVID, whether I know we've got a couple of people here that are still working. I see that Jim's with us here as well. I believe Bert's still out there working a bit. So I don't know if you, either of you would have any comments you'd like to add today. Is that a no, Jim? Okay, nothing for Jim. And Bert, do you have anything? Yeah, Bert, you're muted as well. Okay. There you are, Bert.
How is this?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm still muted, am I?
We can see you and we hear you.
Oh, you can you?
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm saying that a lot of my customers wanted to be careful, so they won't see me at all. And so I've just started back again 1 month ago. And so I'm now seeing a lot of my customers again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking there of,
Sorry, guys.
yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I'm through.
Okay, thank you, Bert.
So I was saying,
Yeah, you go ahead.
yes, David, I was saying a lot of my customers did not, as much as they would have liked to see me, did not want to see me because they were attempting to be careful. And as a result, I have not been doing too much except for the last month.
And the last month would be the opening up of the economy. So I'm assuming in the next few weeks you'll get busier.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. I'm looking forward to that.
All right. I think everybody's looking forward to that. I wanted to add just a comment to what John had said about being an introvert and needing to be around people. My wife and I went out for dinner at Earl's a few weeks ago with a couple other couples. We were nicely sequestered off to the side. And, you know, we had 6 of us just being out in public. It's the first time my wife and I have been out in public really for 18 months or so. Done ice creams and stuff, but you know, it was interesting how empowered I felt the next day after having a conversation with a couple other couples and just being out. It was really interesting. I just thought I'd make that comment. I always thought as an introvert it'd be no issue working in the Zoom environment and being kind of isolated, but I'm wrong. We do need the personal interactions, being able to see people, see the hidden, basically sort of the gestures that we use in our conversation. I see we're coming right up to the 1 o'clock. I do know that we try to end the meetings at 1 o'clock. So I'm thinking that we just stop the meeting at this point. I do have other slides, but Jason can share those with the club next week. Does that sound like a good plan? Looking for thumbs up. Okay, I've got an okay. Excellent. So I'm just going to pause the recording. Feel free to stay on if you wish to. And if not, then just have a great week. It's great to see you all.
David,
Yes,
David,
Ingrid,
I need to make an announcement.
please do so.
Okay. So considering everything that we've talked about today, I contacted Jason and Rob about getting together and revisiting or rediscovering Fort Edmonton.
Okay.
And so we have looked at September 1st at 1:30. We would gather between 1 and 1:30 at the main gate, and then take the steam engine to the Indigenous Peoples Experience. And after that, ride the steam engine back or walk back and experience the Midway. There is a tent there that people can relax in if they want to. I've also talked to the director of the event of Fort Edmonton and have asked her to find a costumed interpreter who would welcome us, and then also someone who would greet us at the IPE once we get there. So that notice, I think Jason is going to send out to everyone. And we have also extended it to a couple of other clubs, like the Downtown Club and Edmonton Sunrise, and also Edmonton White Avenue. And I've heard back from a couple of people who are interested. I realize it's in the afternoon, but Fort Edmonton closes at 5. And then it's closing for this season, September 6th. So this is kind of, I think, the best chance for us to get together. And it would also be during the week that we would normally not have a meeting because of the Labor Day weekend.
Right.
So if people are interested, the advert will come out, and just let me know or Rob know that you're interested, so we have some idea of numbers. You do have to purchase your own tickets, and those are available online, and we can send out that link.
No, that's wonderful, Ingrid. Thank you for putting that together. I look forward to that.
We need some fun, and we need to get together in person, I think.
Yes,
So,
we do. That's
okay.
wonderful. Thank you.